Hello there, YouTube land.
Welcome back.
So, because the werewolf is our theme for the month, we couldn't let it go without having a discussion about werewolves in movies.
I know that in the past we've kind of reviewed a couple of werewolf movies. This time we're kind of stepping into the film industry.
And history. So, it's not surprising that there's so many movies made about werewolves because it's, the idea of the werewolf is ingrained in cultures worldwide. So, this is, also going to be a video that's only about movies with werewolves, period. We're not going to do any hybrid mentions or anything like that, or any, vampires versus werewolves or anything.
No.
Because this video is only going to be about werewolves, and combining things would kind of go against our theme.
So the first ever film made about werewolves was 1913 and called The Werewolf. And it told the story of a Navajo woman who becomes a witch after she thinks her husband abandons her, and she then teaches her daughter how to transform into a wolf to get her revenge. So the wolf transformation in and of itself features a real wolf, and the camera kind of dissolves out to give that transformation effect. It was originally distributed by Universal Studios, but unfortunately the 1924 fire destroyed all prints of the 18-minute film, so it's lost
And,
to the ages.
that's such a shame. I'm so glad that they have, film conservation now to prevent these things from happening. But, boy, I wish I could have seen that one.
It's interesting because I think that's one of the very few movies that goes into the Native American war.
So, the first mainstream Hollywood movie to feature a werewolf was Universal Studios' Werewolf of London, which was released in 1935. Legendary makeup effects master Jack Pierce was called upon to handle the werewolf, but the actor that played the werewolf, Henry Hull, literally hated Pierce's design. I mean, it was so... Yes, and it was so bad, he went to the head of the studio and said he would refuse to play this part if they didn't change the makeup design.
Yeah.
So they came up with a different design for that movie.
But not all is lost. So that was not exactly the end of Pierce's concept, and he used it 6 years later with actor Lon Chaney Jr. in The Wolfman.
Ah. So, because of the real-world horrors of World War II, the 1950s shifted horror to be something relegated to B-movie status and became heavily influenced by science fiction. Horror audiences were now primarily teenagers, and it meant that there weren't that many werewolves on screen, and the few that were kind of combined B-movie schlock with attempts to recapture Pierce's design for Lon Chaney Jr.'s makeup.
So you kind of have that period, that lull of werewolf. So then we come back in 1956 with The Werewolf, which had two scientists injecting their unconscious driver with a serum that transformed him into a vicious man-wolf. And kind of in that similar vein, in 1957, I Was a Teenage Werewolf sees a different take, a little bit of a different take, but it's the same thing. The guy sees his doctor for depression, only to find out that the doc is a mad scientist.
That would be a hell of a day.
Seriously, I'm depressed. We'll talk about this. So he injects him, kind of gives him, over to experimentation, turns him into a werewolf. So, although a little campy, it became one of the American International Pictures best-selling films, and today is almost a cult classic.
So, by the 1960s, horror became something more sophisticated again, and the first notable film was Hammer Horror's The Curse of the Werewolf in 1961. It was Hammer Films' only feature-length werewolf film, and it's very similar to the story of The Wolfman. It features Oliver Reed playing a character named Leon Corledo, who was a bastard son, cursed at birth, to become a werewolf.
And again, all those folkloric roots
Things are coming in.
So 1973 gave us The Boy Who Cried Werewolf, a film about a boy who watches his father become a werewolf. And let's all crack up at the idea that the film's climax involves the werewolf attacking Jesus hippies. It's also one of the few films so far that gave the werewolf an actual snout.
So you have Jesus, hippies, and a snout. That's a
You
combination.
have a snoot to boop in that film.
So then in the 1970s, we're presented with the rise of the Spanish filmmaker and actor Paul Naschy and his Hombre Lobo werewolf series, which featured a character named Valdemar Daninsky. There are 12 films in this series, and oddly, none of them have a connecting plotline. Yeah.
Makes it a little hard to follow.
Yeah.
So now we get into the 1980s, and the rise of special visual effects is what kind of brought werewolves back into the mainstream in a huge way. 1981 gave us the release of both The Howling and An American Werewolf in London. And they both have unrivaled transformation sequences that have yet to be beat today.
Yeah.
So Rick Baker won an Oscar for his work on An American Werewolf in London. The first year the Academy Award created the category for Best Makeup.
Yeah, so that's an idea of how good it was.
It's good.
It's still amazing to this day.
It is still probably one of the best transformation sequences out there.
So, the golden age of practical effects brought a slew of werewolf films like Silver Bullet, Teen Wolf, Company of Wolves.
And that kind of brings us into the 1990s, where when we were kind of treated to two great films. So we have Wolf and Bad Moon. So further advances in technology, of course, kind of changed the effects from practical into the computer-generated aids, and the highly anticipated sequel to Landis's beloved werewolf movie that released in 1997, An American Werewolf in Paris. Kind of disappointed with its digital transformation scene. It didn't hold up to An American Werewolf in London.
Not at all.
But it did mark the first in the digital trend.
Yeah. So mainstream Hollywood would continue to employ heavy use of CGI because it was much less expensive than the traditional way of doing special effects. So you had films like Cursed, and Rick Baker was even initially involved in that movie, but they scrapped him in favor of CGI because of cost. And we had The Wolfman in 2010, Red Riding Hood, Howl, and all these other films used digital work to create their werewolves. And while the technology has continued to advance, these still don't hold a candle to the practical effects.
No, they really don't. And things were different kind of in the independent film industry, however. So Ginger Snaps kind of unleashed a vicious puberty metaphor by way of werewolves, featuring very practical effects, unique, slow werewolf transformations, and a great werewolf design overall.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of having the werewolf have a tail before they're fully formed was really unique and entertaining. Yeah. 2 years later, writer-director Neil Marshall gave us Dog Soldiers, and there's no subtext or changes to the werewolf myth, but it's a full-blown werewolf siege on unsuspecting soldiers in the Scottish Highlands. If you cannot get behind that movie...
yeah, you have to.
It's epic.
This is a kind of your classic werewolf.
Yes.
I am going to eat you, and there will be no mercy.
No.
So independent filmmakers kind of continued to give unique ideas kind of when it comes to this genre. So films like Late Phases, using werewolves as a way of dealing with aging. Or Wolf Cop, that uses werewolves to kind of a humorous effect, are some of the more entertaining additions to the genre as of late.
So we really hope filmmakers continue to add to the werewolf mythos. It's a fun and entertaining part of horror culture. Please comment down below with the most unique werewolf movie you've ever seen, because if we haven't seen it, we're totally down for it. We want to see that.
Yeah.
So we hope you've enjoyed this foray into werewolf fun.
The next time you see us will be for ghost stories.
Yes. And we'll get all spooky again. So, till next time.
Bye.